Okay. What's your name?
I'm Pat Brown from the Mishawaka Settlement.
I'm Edmund Wanapee from the Mishawaka Settlement.
Okay. I'm Rick Thompson, chairman of the Institute, and I've been sweating it out, waiting for them to come. And I think we've got a good panel here. Obviously, we could not get the participants to the Institute, but these people, the two women on my right and left, are natives of this state. They've had ancestors who were here even before everybody came here to till the land. And I think they can answer the questions probably just as forthrightly as anybody that's participated in this institute so far. And I really hope you'll ask questions that you would have asked of the participants in the institute.
I want to ask them a question, if you don't mind. The two ladies. Do either of you know the name of the current Commissioner of Indian Affairs?
Huh?
Do either of you know the name of the current Commissioner of Indian Affairs? The guy who's the commissioner now? Do you know his name? Do you know his name? What's his name? Yeah, I'm just asking them. I'm testing something on my own.
Oh,
the ladies. The ladies. Do you know, what's his name? The commissioner.
The commissioner is Lois Bruce.
Do you know what tribe he is?
Seneca,
Seneca.
Mohawk,
Mohawk and Sioux.
half-breed.
Yeah. Right. But I was just asking.
I think there's one thing that I'd like to tell these people. When the white man first came on the Mayflower, he brought one person with him. He converted a lot of people in your country. So when the white man came on the Mayflower, this man came with him. And he converted a lot of people. Now, he's saying to himself, how can I get to these Indians? How can I convert these Indians? This was the devil. He was trying to find a way to get at these Indians. Years and years he tried to get at the Indian. Well, he couldn't convert him to his way. And then this went on for years and years. He tried every way. And back in 1812, all of a sudden it dawned on him. Now I know a way to convert all these Indians to my side. And he formed the Bureau of Indian Affairs at this date.
I'm sure my cousins, my nephews, my nieces, my brothers and sisters have handled this. I'm losing my voice. But like yesterday, and like today, we're using Indian time. Indian time is 1 hour later because Indian does use time, in a sense, to understand your ways, but he has season time. We use seasons instead of the clock. We were late getting here because we went to Tama to visit some people there. Like we come here to visit you as people here. Brightman people, I want to extend this invitation now before I lose my voice completely. I want a young man place. I think he's capable and able to moderate the panel. I'm not questioning how the panel was going till now, but I will not turn this over. Who is a former student and will be coming back to Iowa State. Arthur Blacklock Jr. Now, my brother, where are you? I was sorry about the delay, but we had not anticipated the unforeseen circumstances. But now, let us begin. Let's continue with the discussion.
While we are waiting for Mr. Brightman to come, the panel members, Mr. Gigama, which you've already been introduced to. And Mr. Brightman, who has just come here, late arrival, as the rest of us. Mr. Brightman is president of the United Native Americans and editor of their paper, Warpath. He is an outspoken critic of the Bureau of Indian Affairs and advocates Indian control of Indian affairs. We shall begin this discussion here by asking Mr. Gigama why he wanted to go into the Bureau of Indian Affairs and his intentions and goals of what he wants to do here, and we'll just let him answer that for the start.
I answered that yesterday, I think.
Would you repeat that, please?
Yeah, I will, as best as I can. I'm there because the Commissioner of Indian Affairs asked me to come to work for him to help him explain and present reforms in the Bureau of Indian Affairs that he is implementing that haven't been done or offered or conceived or attempted in several generations. And I believe that these reforms are workable, that they do represent at last a beginning of the end of the paternalistic role of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I believe that what these new policies that the Commissioner is implementing for the Bureau of Indian Affairs will end in exactly what Mr. Brightman and what I have advocated for a long time, that is control of Indian affairs by Indians. And I believe that personally, and the commitment that I made is personal, and I'm there to do what I can because I feel that doing this is my way, my contribution of helping the Indian cause and the Indian people, and I'm dedicated to that. I'm not there to make money or anything like that. I'm there to do a job, to try to do it as best I can, and That's it. That's why I'm there. And I think I said that most of that yesterday.
You said that you was always picketing and fighting from the outside. And once you got into the BIA, you said you were going to help fight for the Indian cause. Then what?
I did pick it up against the BIA all the time, more than a lot of people who are picketing now. I was making it's my whole undertaking, not just picketing. There's really not that much to picketing, but complaining and writing about the BIA. Bad word. I'm also editor of a paper called Americans Before Columbus, which is the newspaper of the National Indian Youth Council. I edit it, and it's a similar paper to Mr. Brightman's. It very soon will begin publishing twice a month and will have a national circulation. And I insisted when I went to the Bureau of Indian Affairs that I be able to keep my editorship of this paper and to be able to say what I pleased about the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the editorials that I write for and the articles I write for it. Mr. Brightman and my fellow editors of these kinds of papers know about Americans Before Columbus, and I just put out an issue of it, and this has happened since I've been at the BIA, and I wish I had copies of it, but I'm continuing my anti-BIA stance. It's quixotic, I know it seems that way, but I'm still a critic of the BIA, only I'm lodged in the side of the beast now, and that's where I'm at. It's a weird position, and I'm trying to explain it.
Mr. Brightman, it says here in this brochure that that you've testified before Senate subcommittees on various Indian problems. And what are the problems?
You mean what are the problems
Yes.
of Indians? Too many white people, for one thing. The Bureau of Indian Affairs has approximately 18,000 employees within it, of which over half are non-Indian. And of these non-Indians, about 10%, or I should say 90%, of the upper executive positions within the Bureau of Indian Affairs are controlled by non-Indians. The Commissioner of Indian Affairs is selected by the President, confirmed by the Senate, so we don't even elect the Commissioner. So there is no Indian control of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The Bureau doesn't respond to pressure from Indian people on the reservation level. And I felt it was my job, as an Indian, to speak out against these injustices. So in 1968, I formed a national Indian organization called UNA, United Native Americans, which has since been called labeled a militant organization, which is duly so. I consider myself probably, and I'm not a militant, an activist, because I've been speaking out quite strongly against the Bureau and its practices. The Bureau of Indian Affairs has tried to force Indian people to fit their outdated programs, instead of trying to force the programs or to regulate them to fit the needs of Indian people. And I have had quite a list of jobs in which I've tried to help Indian people. I used to be the director of the Indian Center in San Francisco. And at that time, I became quite deeply involved in Indian politics when I found out that the Bureau has what they call a relocation program, where they will relocate Indians from reservations into urban areas. Indian people between the ages of 18 and 35, if you've got a family, they'll relocate you into an urban area of your choosing and put you in a vocational training course where you can learn to be a welder, a mechanic, or a barber. Last year, the Bureau of Indian Affairs appropriated $25 million for vocational training and only $3 million for academic work. They're trying to make a race of common laborers out of Indian people rather than give us a chance to get into the academic field or the professional field, such as doctors and engineers, school teachers, and things of this nature. And when I found out that the Bureau was sending people on one-way trips into the city, these relocation programs, it's a one-way trip into the city, and all they're doing really is transporting people from one pocket of poverty to another, from the reservation into the ghettos of the city. And in many cases, they give our people so little funds that they have to move into the ghettos of the city. They put them in vocational training courses. In many cases, they're not state accredited. And when they graduate from these programs, they can't find jobs. I have a wife who was brought out from South Dakota to be a dental technician, making false teeth and so forth. After graduating from this school, the school that she graduated from was so bad that none of the dental labs would employ her. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs got her a job working as a scrub woman in a factory, a new factory they were renovating. She worked there for a week, got blisters on her knees and hands and what have you, and she finally told them, she said that she was trained to be a dental technician, not a scrub woman. So she turned around then and they got her a job in Sausalito, California, which is about 30 miles from San Francisco, working in a laundry, pressing clothes. Well, they had spent quite a bit of money training her to be a dental technician. So she worked there a week, and she told them she wanted to go home, back to the reservation. She's an orphan. She didn't have any money to get back on, and the Bureau wouldn't send her home. There are countless cases like this, where they bring them out, put them through vocational training courses to be mechanics and so forth, welders. We found countless cases where they put them in welding courses where they don't teach them heliarc welding, blueprint reading. And what happens is when they get out, they can't compete with a regular welder, and they can't find jobs. And if they can't employ you as a welder, they'll put you out as a dishwasher or something of this nature. And if you drop out, they don't pay your way home. They don't try to find you another job. And what they do, they go into Indian high school students when they're in the 12th grade, and they'll show them brochures of somebody wearing a nice white smock with a pencil and a pad overlooking a car as a mechanic. Well, maybe you have no aptitude for this. So they send you out there, you pick this. You want to become a mechanic, and after you get to the urban area of your choosing, maybe after crawling around and under that grit and grime under cars or the oil dripping on you, and you get a few colds and smash a few fingers, you decide that you're not cut out to be a mechanic, that maybe you would like to be a carpenter or something. Well, you can't change schools. If you drop out of the school they put you in, you pay your way home. And most of our people aren't city-oriented, so they don't know how to function in a city. They don't know how to apply for a job. And they don't give them orientation enough before they leave the reservations on what to expect when they get into the cities. And once they get them into the cities, they bring too many in at one time and they can't find them jobs and no city orientation. And they wind up getting on dope, booze, in the ghettos, and completely lost. And we find that they're transporting our people, as I said, from one pocket of poverty to another. And this is how I got involved and why I began speaking out, because I think it's up to you people, you non-Indians. Indian people are never going to get out of this pocket of poverty we're in by ourselves, because it's going to take a combined effort of Indians and non-Indians. We don't have the expertise in the field of law, medicine, in the field of education, health-wise and so forth, and we're going to have to depend upon the American public to help us in a sense. And you are helping in a sense. You're paying taxes, and your taxes go to support this government of ours, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs is part of it. And there are millions of dollars each year that go down the drain that are earmarked for Indians that never reach them. A lot of white people complain about Indians going to public schools. They say that Indians don't pay taxes, so why should white people pay taxes who are property owners to support a public school and allow Indians to go there when they live on non-taxable land, reservation land? So they say, why should we pay taxes when the government's taking care of those Indians? They don't pay taxes on our land, but they want to go to our public schools. So the government came up with what they call Johnson O'Malley funds, where they will give public schools money, so much money for each Indian that goes there to pay for hot lunches, transportation, tutorial programs, tutors and so forth, cultural enrichment programs. Well, they give these schools these monies to educate Indians. They're actually bribing them to accept Indians. They're subsidizing them. Then when the schools say, well, we're being overcrowded by these Indians, so they say, okay, we'll give you extra funds. They want what they call impact aid funds. 815 of this gives school districts money for new school construction, new buildings, new classroom buildings, new gymnasiums and so forth if they're being overcrowded. And then they have further some additional funds, 874, which go to back up these other funds. They're actually in lieu of taxes. And we find out now that in many cases, federal funds that go to public schools, sometimes they make up 10 times the amount of money that you non-Indians pay to support that public school. And in some cases, public schools will reduce their taxes to white people because they're given so much money from the federal government to educate Indians. And yet white people will say, why should we let those damn Indians go to our public schools? They don't pay taxes. But in lieu of taxes, the government's giving them millions of dollars. Last year, $66 million was earmarked for Indians in public schools that went down the drain. And public schools do nothing for Indians except ease their own tax burdens in school districts and set up virtually nothing for Indians. This is kind of disgusting, and after a while, if you're an Indian and you're involved, you get disgusted, frustrated, and mad, and so you try to do something. You form militant organizations. I don't advocate violence, and I don't think violence is a way for Indian people. We make up less than 1/2 of 1% of the total population of this country, and we're scattered over 25 states, and we're divided tribally. And when we go into urban areas, we're not city-oriented. We've got old tribal feuds going. We can't even get together in any large group. We fight and disagree with each other. So we're not going to do anything by violence, so you people needn't worry about us taking back this country. You've got to worry about the blacks, though, because you've got a large amount of blacks in the urban areas, and they're centrally located there. But we are too few, so we can't resort to violence, but we've copied black tactics, set-ins, marches, and things of this nature, boycotts. But as far as I'm concerned, we're too few in number, too scattered, and we're too divided tribally and so forth to ever do anything with violence. But I think if we unite and develop a pan-Indian movement, where I'm a Sioux Indian, you've got a Passamaquoddy, you've got a Chippewa, have you, and be proud of your Indianness and your individual tribe, but we've got to develop a pan-Indian movement where we're proud of our Indianness, and we're going to hang together as a group. And this is what we're pushing for, pan-Indian movements, self-determination, the right to run your own affairs and direct your own destiny, which is a God-given right, and it's guaranteed under the Constitution. I'm sure that you people wouldn't like to see your schools run by another group of people. You'd have no say-so in your schools. You couldn't be elected to the school board. We just came from a reservation down here, a few distance. What's the name of the reservation? Meskwaki Indian Settlement. And they have a grade school there that Indians don't sit on a school board. They have no say in who is employed as a school teacher. They have no say in how the curriculum is to be developed, wants to be taught there. Nothing. No say-so in the government at all of how their schools are being run. Nothing of this nature. This is something that I'm sure that if you non-Indians had your children in some schools and you couldn't sit in on a school board, select the curriculum, and you couldn't help run the schools, you weren't invited to PTA meetings, faculty meetings and things of this nature, I'm sure you'd gripe. And we're seeking awareness, and we're finding out now that a young group of Indians are coming about, college-educated Indians who go to this college and many others around the country. And they're mad, frustrated, disgusted. The young man sitting on the end down here, he's just been in the Bureau of Indian Affairs for 2 months. He doesn't know that much about the Bureau.
I know quite a bit about the Bureau.
I'm not trying to belittle you there. I'm just saying that we've got some new young men who are getting into the Bureau. And
I hope that you don't intend that by saying that 2 months thing as a kind of invidious thing to discredit my saying anything about the Bureau of Indian Affairs. If that's your intent, then I reject it.
No, I'm not trying to
I know quite a bit about the Bureau of Indian Affairs because I've been in this game for a long time. And just because I've been a BIA person for 2 months means not really a whole lot.
Well, we've got Bureau of employees who've been in for 25 and 30 years. And they've been misdirecting our lives now since 1824 when the Bureau of Indian Affairs was formed. And I'm sure in 2 months you haven't become a goddamn authority in 2 months. So I didn't get up here to argue with you, though. I was just presenting a point.
Could I address myself to the panel one thing? Let's cover some new ground. All this has been said last night and yesterday, and I've explained how I got into the BIA, and most of you people were here, and Lehman said practically everything that he said just now. He said it last night. Let's try to cover some new ground, okay? I would like to do that at this panel discussion instead of going over the same ground. All right? Let's talk about some different things instead of haranguing. Because these people have heard all this. So one thing, is the guy, the anthropology professor whose class I talked to a while ago, is he here? Right before, at 2 o'clock, his 2 o'clock class, is he here? The guy? What? So I hope we can talk about some other things besides how I got into the BIA and why I'm there. I don't care about that, and I'm sure that you're not that interested in it either, or how long I've been there and what I know. Let's talk about some Indian things. All
Okay,
right?
about the relocation thing about the Indians.
I think that the relocation program has created the bulk of the urban Indian problem by shipping all the Indians to giving them a one-way ticket, as Lehman said, to the cities that take all these bunky courses in barbering and everything. I agree with that. The relocation program is terrible. It's dreadful, and the Bureau is going to do something about changing it. It has been the program of the Bureau and the federal government that has caused the mass influx of Indians into the urban areas. Now we have all these Indians in urban areas that don't get services of BIA or any of the things that the reservation rural Indians get. So now the Indian problem is split into two separate areas, urban and rural, and the main cause of it is relocation. So I think relocation is terrible, and I would never support it, never. Yeah, Hickel was getting ready to do any of you know anything about a study that Alvin Josephy did of the federal government policies towards Indians about a year ago? Do any of you know who Alvin Josephy is, the writer? The Nixon administration asked him to do a comprehensive examination of federal policies and bureaucracies and things that serve Indian people, and come up with some recommendations because the Nixon people wanted to make some changes with Indians. So Josephy did this big long report, and he recommended that the Bureau of Indian Affairs be made a complete separate governmental organization that's not attached to any department at all, kind of like its own department in a sense, only not anything that vast. And to just have it get its money from Congress and spend it in its own way. That's the thrust of the Josephy report and the recommendations, but the Nixon administration didn't follow them. Hickel was reaching the verge where he was going to recommend to the president that this be done with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, that the Josephy report be followed through with, and policy was. No, nothing at all.
When Hickel first came into office, you know, he did a number of very extremely bad things to Indians. You know, for instance, when he was governor of Alaska, the Indian people up there were making their living fishing. They were making an average of about $500 a year fishing. And they only had one group of buyers to sell their fish to, and that was a group of buyers out of Seattle, Washington. They were giving them approximately 12 cents a pound for their fish. And they'd come by once a year to buy their fish. So the Indians got together and formed a co-op and built an ice storage plant to store their fish so they could sell it when the prices were up. And mysteriously, an ice storage plant burned down in Alaska. It would almost take some napalm and 2 or 3 arsonists to get one to burn anyway. Nevertheless, after the ice storage plant burned down, the Indians up there, the Native Americans I should say, made a contract with the Japanese fishing company to come in and buy their fish. And they were going to give them 2 times the amount, a little over 2 times the amount that the Seattle buyers were paying them. So when the Japanese boat came into the harbor, Mr. Hickel, who was then governor of Alaska, took a boat and went out and stopped the ship and tried to keep them from coming into the harbor. Then he turned around when he couldn't do this. He went back and had a plane come out and they buzzed the ship. When they couldn't intimidate them in this manner, well, then he turned around and he told them they were violating the Neutrality Act. They called Washington, D.C. and got clearance, found out they weren't. Then he told them they were violating the North Pacific Fishing Treaty. They called Washington, D.C. again and got further clearance that they weren't violating this, and when they proceeded to come in, Mr. Hickel met with them behind closed doors. He met with the Japanese officials behind closed doors for 4 hours. They were not allowing the Eskimos or their lawyers into the meeting.
When the meeting was over, they emerged and told the Eskimos they weren't going to buy their fish. And they had thousands of pounds of fish that were later to be waiting to be loaded on these refrigeration ships. And they spoiled. And the Eskimos, instead of making $500 a year, they were making nothing. And they had a chance to increase their earnings to about $1,600 or $2,000. They were forced then to go on state welfare, federal welfare, and so forth. Hickel then went into
the Paiutes in Nevada. And he told them he was going to help them with their lake up there. They got a lake called Pyramid Lake, which is fed by what they call the Truckee River. Well, over the last few years, different white ranchers and so forth have siphoned off the water as it comes down before it reaches Truckee River, before the Truckee runs into the lake. So consequently, the water is a mere trickle by the time it reaches the Paiute Lake. Also, they put in a dam up there, a little further ahead. So the Indians asked Stuart Udall, when he was Secretary of Interior, if he would allow the runoff each year during the flood season when this river builds up. They run it off into a washout area. And they said if Udall would allow them to let this excess water run into Truckee, down to Truckee into Pyramid Lake. Udall said he would. When the flood season came, they didn't run it into the Paiutes Lake. They ran it into another washout area. So they asked Hickel about this. He said, I'll help you. So his idea of helping them was he decided to reduce the lake 172 feet in depth, which many experts said would make this lake a worthless mudflat, killing off the existing fish supply and a large pelican reserve they had there. And they had a cutthroat trout that used to spawn from this, and they couldn't get out of the stream because out of the lake because it dried up so. So Hickel did this, and then he made the remark, he said that Indians had been overprotected by the federal government, and it was time the government cut the cord. He was speaking of termination, where the government cuts off federal services, health, education, and welfare. So we asked Hickel about this, and a lot of us got up in arms, and we printed up, my organization, UNA, United Native Americans, we printed up Impeach Hickel bumper stickers, and we had petitions going around, and I was asked to testify in Washington against him, and we were very anti-Hickel, and what shocked us was, there at the last, Hickel became pro-Indian in a sense. He stopped an airport from being built in Florida, which would have possibly ruined much of the land occupied by the Florida Indians, the Seminoles, and we couldn't figure this out. He did a complete 90-degree turn. He stopped this airport from being put in, and he was speaking about many things that were pro-Indian, putting in a little few reforms for self-determination, and I had changed my opinion on him. I almost wrote a letter to him telling him that I thought that he had done a good job, but I thought, oh hell, what's the use in it? So, but I did, and a lot of other Indian people that I know, Indian organizations, changed their mind about Hickel, especially when he stated that through that letter he accidentally, on purpose, let leak out to the president, you know, where he said that he felt the government was too harsh on college students and what have you.
I will support everything that Lehman has told you about Hickel by saying that the Eskimos and Native Alaskans hate him, and so do the Paiutes. And Hickel did make these blunders, terrible blunders, and they were of such a nature that to undo them, to undo what was done by the blunders, will take a long time to undo. And he's very hated by these two particular tribes.
Well, let's go on to another point. Well, go on.
Tomorrow I'm supposed to, or yeah, I guess it's tomorrow, I'm supposed to give a delivery on the termination policies of the United States and Canada. Now, termination is a pretty big topic to talk about, and I would like to be more objective tomorrow than subjective, and I feel that this would be, here at this time would be an opportunity for me to explain some of the things that occurred in my tribe, the Menominee of Upper Wisconsin. Termination, according to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, is the cutting off of all federal funds to a reservation, thereby removing Indian status of that tribe. His land becomes taxable. His treaty rights are broken. The Menominees were selected as one of the tribes to be terminated because they were becoming economically and politically successful. In other words, they were striving towards Indian self-determination. But the federal government came in to put a stop to this. The Menominees were gaining too much control of their own destiny, of their own lands, and of their own future. They had a hospital, they owned their own water and light company, they owned everything on their reservation. In 1947, Commissioner Zimmerman of the Bureau of Indian Affairs introduced into Congress the termination policy, which I have just defined for you. In 1951, the Menominees won a lawsuit against the United States government for mismanagement of tribal funds, and also for the federal government did not come in and salvage several million board feet of lumber that was damaged by a tornado that went through the reservation. In 1924, the Indians were given citizenship, and so the Menominees had the right to go in and check on the records and also to sue the government. The federal government thought that this was a gift to the Indian, and that it was foolish that the Menominees had the audacity to go out and sue the federal government for $8,500,000. So they won their lawsuit, and with the other monies that they had in their treasury, their total assets amounted to $10 million. Senator Watkins from Utah came in and said, "This tribe is wealthy. They're doing good. They have their own industry and their own hospital. I would advise that they be terminated." Well, the Menominees, after winning this $8 million, wanted to split this money up per capita. But Senator Watkins came in and said, if you want to split your money up per capita, then you're going to have to take termination too. Senator Watkins also said that if any Indian can sue in a white man's court, if he knows the white man's way that well, then he's smart enough to go on his own. And so termination was stuck in the, like a joke in the deck. And when the Menominees voted to accept $1,500, termination was also attached to that vote. Out of 3,270 Menominees, only 169 voted. This vote was accepted as a representative vote for the Menominee tribe. What I'm trying to get at here is by saying, or I'm trying to say that when Indian people do get ahead, when they do start to go out of the circle of poverty, then they are set right back into deeper poverty. The Menominee Indian tribe is now considered Wisconsin's one and only Indian county, Wisconsin's poorest county. A long time ago, Indians used to be exterminated or annihilated through war, through germ warfare, massacres, etc. Now the new method is through bureaucracy and paperwork. The federal government wants to wash its hands of the Indian problem. The only reason that there is an Indian problem is because the Indians are still here. We have endured for over 478 years. And I don't think that the Indians, or I don't prefer to call this two-word phrase Indian problem an Indian problem. I would rather call it a struggle. And we are stopped from struggling, as my tribe was. That's about all I'd have to say for right now, because I have a lot of other facts and things to tell you about the whole termination process, not only for the Menominees, but also for some Canadians. Well, yeah, there's been other tribes that have been terminated. There's been the Klamath and some Paiute tribes, and I think, Mr. Brighton, you said there's about 66 different tribes that were terminated? Anyway, that's a figure that I know of, that there have been over 66 different tribes that have been terminated.
Let's get on to another topic there. This education problem the Indians have there. We need to have more Indian control over the schools. And I would like to know what is being done by the BIA and what do the Indian people of other tribes think about it, you know?
Well, first of all, in regards to Johnson and O'Malley funds that the Bureau of Indian Affairs has, last week, a week ago yesterday, Tuesday in Washington, the Commissioner of Indian Affairs promised a group that Mr. Brightman was a member of, a task force that did a very comprehensive study of misuse of federal funds, Johnson O'Malley and Title I funds, by state and local officials, money intended for Indians.
Well,
I'm getting to that. And the Bureau has a lot of this money that it's involved with. The Commissioner promised them that within 30 days he would have a complete review of all BIA involvements with these monies, Title I and Johnson O'Malley, and he would find out exactly what the thing is and give a report to them, and would revamp, change, or whatever the Bureau's role in this to whatever degree he could at once. All right, now school boards. The Bureau of Indian Affairs is now has a program of setting up advisory school boards for all of its reservation boarding schools and off-reservation boarding schools. Most of them have them now. Either advisory or they run the whole school, and it hasn't gotten into a completely operating system yet of Indians running these schools. In some cases, the tribal council has to contract the schools and run them themselves. But there is a program in the education branch of the Bureau of Indian Affairs to set up school boards in every school that is controlled and run by Bureau of Indian Affairs monies for Indian parents with students with children in those schools to be the school board for that particular school. And that is a program. That information is now available on out of the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington.
Mr. Brightman, do you agree with what he said? And do you know of any important movement which has been done by the BIA in relation to what he said there?
There hasn't been any evidence that's shown so far that I know of. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, there was a presidential directive sent out that Indian schools were supposed to have elective school boards. And as of a year ago, there was only one out of 226 that had an elected Indian school board. This is one of the major gripes of Indian people. They don't have any voice in their education of their children. They don't teach Indian history and culture on reservation boarding schools. There are very few Indian teachers who teach in Bureau of Indian Affairs schools. Only 16% of the teachers are of Indian extraction. So this is one of the major gripes. One of the big things I think we're facing, though, is the fact that we've got so few Indians in college. There's only about 1 or 2 or 3% of the Indians who manage to make it to college. And of these, we only have 20 Indian PhDs in the United States today. Ford Foundation came out with some reports last year at this time. There were 10 Indian PhDs, but now we've got together with a number of Indian educators, and we figure there are around 20 that we could count. So you figure 20 Indians with PhDs out of approximately 600,000, which is a low count on Indians in this country. There might be anywhere up to 100,000, you can't tell, but it's a very low count. This school here, for instance, one of the bigger schools in the United States, you don't have an Indian studies program here. You teach a few simplified courses on Indians by non-Indians who are doing the teaching. You've only got around four Indians in this school. You would think a big university like this, that you would have some type of funding source to bring in Indians from some of the reservations who are destitute and poor, that need money to go in. If you want to do something, you'd think something like this would be done, a big university like this. Why in the hell isn't the president? Why isn't an admission officer? Why aren't they trying to bring Indians in? You know, the people in this country who need help the most are the least able to help themselves. Poor whites, poor blacks, poor Asians, Chicanos, Indians. They're the least able to help themselves, and they need help the most. That's why universities like this are going to have to do a little more than to sit back and issue degrees and teach courses on outdated courses that don't fit the needs of the people today. PhDs. To get a PhD nowadays, a PhD is purely political. Anyway, and to find an Indian with a PhD is like finding a diamond in the rough or something. And to get Indians in a major university like this and keep them here is a very, very hard task. In the first place, a lot of them don't have, well, 90% of them don't have the money. They don't even know, in most cases, Indians on reservations, that they have special programs like this Federal Guaranteed Loan, this NEDA Act, this National Education Defense Appropriation Act that you can borrow money from. They don't know of any of these programs, that they've got special funds for Indians, because they're not told about them. And universities such as this, they should have people going out and trying to recruit minority people to bring them in. They should be teaching courses on Indian history and culture here, because it's a cultural enrichment thing. It gives you something you're not getting in your regular curriculum here. You should have Indian instructors. You should learn something of the other people in this country. You people learn more about Europe than you do about Indians in this country. We have given a tremendous amount to this country, which very little is actually recognized through the textbooks. Your historians who've written most of our textbooks have been very race conscious. They can't break away from their own Anglo-Saxon race consciousness long enough to write an objective test. And universities such as this and many other around the country are just now beginning to realize that they don't have minority groups in. They've got a very few. 4 Indians in this university out of 20,000? You haven't even touched it, and they're not financing any of them. You know, you wouldn't be really giving anybody anything. You'd be doing a service, because you would be getting these people off the tax rolls, welfare rolls, rather, I should say. You'd be helping them, and that's what we're supposed to be doing, especially in higher education like this, is enriching their lives by giving them some education you can't get on a high school level. And this university, this is a damn national disgrace. To think that a big university like this, in a state such as this, you've got 4 Indians in. This is something that only the university officials can rectify. Yes?
I think what you have to do is that I think you have to be differentiating what you're talking about. That I don't believe the white people and the white students at this university have any more power or control over what's happening than the people in this nation do.
No, you don't as an individual. I'm saying the university officials are going to have to recognize this, but possibly to bring it to their attention, the Indians in this state are going to have to get together and come and talk to the university officials and suggest something of this nature.
More than that, I think when you're talking to white students, I think you have to push out what does affect them. And I think it's real key is that no one on the panel has pushed out anything about racism. And somehow I see that as being real key to totally to the Indian struggle, that it is totally tied up with their economic oppression of the system. That racism has been used by the system to control people and oppress people, and that I think we can avoid that. That when you talk to students or people who basically don't have any control of their lives, but still act as an oppressor, then when you're talking about racism, I think you have to confront that.
Racism exists on all levels of our society, and probably this university is one of the shining examples of it, that they don't have any courses on Indians here, that they don't have 4 Indians